Meeting to order.
There you go.
Okay, quick roll call.
Okay. Grady Bonzel,
Here.
Dennis Sneeden,
Yep.
Matt McKenzie,
Here.
Mary Ellen Kummerow,
I'm here.
Wally Ann.
Here.
Very good. Appears there's no public comment tonight, so we will move right into bullet point number 3, an ordinance amending the text for Chapter 19, Section 452. Is that Zach or Kent?
And
He can start.
I can start. We've been talking about this for a while, but this is the actual ordinance that was included in your packet. And we'll go through it tonight. If you think it's sufficient, I also included in your packet how a text amendment works, that you guys set it for public hearing, and then we have the public hearing, and then after the public hearing, you would recommend it to the city commission if you think it's sufficient. What tonight is about is is this sufficient in its current form in order to set the public hearing.
Okay.
That's what you're basically looking at. I asked Josh, and then I don't know if you guys looked at it originally, but what currently is in section 452. It's a little small, but and I don't know if you'll have a hard time getting it big enough for us to see it.
Yeah, it'll be very difficult because of the way it was.
You
Okay.
can shrink the table.
There you go.
Uh,
452.
Just keep scrolling.
There's 451.
There you
There's 452.
Yay.
So
Hopefully everything's
go. Yeah, it is.
this is what it currently says. It has the intent. And the intent in this ordinance that's proposed to you doesn't change from what it says there. The intent of this district is to provide low-density residential development, including those uses which reinforce residential neighborhoods and to allow certain public facilities. The second point, permitted uses, is what is changed in the proposed ordinance. In what we have now, it basically groups it all in a paragraph. In what is proposed, that is, was in your packet, it says permitted principal uses by right, which is single-family dwellings, including manufactured and modular homes, duplexes, and group home limited, 1 through 8, so less than 8 people. But you notice on there, on the current one, it says 2-family dwellings, churches and community centers, governmental office buildings, golf courses, limited agricultural nursery uses, and related accessory uses are permitted. For a general listing of permitted and conditional uses, see Article 5. It tells you to go somewhere else. So what this proposed ordinance then is we have the principal uses by right and then permitted accessory uses by right, which includes accessory dwelling units not to exceed the size of the principal structure or the maximum allowable lot coverage. So that's the ADUs that we were talking about quite a bit. Dormitory style residences, fences and walls. Now that's something you'd want to refer to another section because it'll jumble up this. Garages, carports, off-street parking, and loading areas. And then it talks about certain restrictions on that. And then radio and television receiving antennas and support structures. And then it continues on through some other items. Storage and parking of RV equipment. Storm shelters and fallout shelters. Swimming pools subject to a setback of blah, 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 4 feet. And other uses not specifically listed as permitted uses, but which in the opinion of the Planning Commission are in keeping with the intent of the district and these regulations. One thing I guess I didn't ask you, Zach, or I didn't ask Barb, This only has single-family dwellings. It does have duplexes there, sorry.
So we decided to get rid of two-family dwellings and just have it listed as duplexes, and then once we go through the definitions, that's when we'll update the definitions to get rid of two-family and just relate it to duplex.
Okay, makes sense.
So, and the reason I'm going through this kind of line by line is to make sure you understand it, and it's what it should be, so, what you would like. Does that make sense to you, how changed from the current permitted uses to what's proposed?
Yeah, what's proposed is much more clear to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like how you have it all bullet pointed out. And versus here, it's just kind of like, it feels like just take everything we can think of and group it in one paragraph. So it's not clear. Okay.
Any questions or concerns about something that's not listed?
I see you said, I mean, we haven't got there yet, but it's coming up where in this paragraph, in the old code, it talked about the government buildings, the parks, recreation, schools, but you've listed that separately. And
Right.
bullet pointed it out coming up here, so I like that better too.
Yeah, because it seems like you're switching back and forth within the current paragraph between a public zone and a residential zone and some other zone. Kind of, and like you said, Matt, kind of grouping it all together
Yep.
in one paragraph.
And the thought behind it is making it the easiest way possible for somebody that's not from our community to just be able to look at the code and be like, this is what I can do and this is what I'm not allowed to do.
Yep.
Okay, and then we continue after, and two, we only have two on the current one, but here we go into C, home occupancy uses, which refers to another section, and that's so you can revise that subsection if need be, easier than revising it here, because more than one district will refer to home occupancy. And then D has public, quasi-public, and recreation uses. So that includes public buildings, facilities, schools, and places of worship if the traffic impacts can be mitigated and if adequate parking arrangements are made either on site or on an adjacent site. Government service, excluding safety services. Hospitals, parks and rec, schools, and then other uses. But, they may not everything may be listed. That's really what that last thing is. But if it's in the same spirit and an intent, then it fits that category. Any question on those two different sections? And then we get into conditional uses, number 3. So this would be section 452. 19-452, subsection 3, conditional uses. We have assisted living, boarding house, group home, general, 9+. So there is a difference between 8 or less or 9+.
I have a question about that. Is there a maximum?
No, it really would be, since it's conditional use, it would have to go through a process.
Okay,
It would have to get approval.
okay,
So in that approval, you can limit it.
okay.
But if they built a big enough facility, let's say it's something like Topeka where they have the big,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
then it could be a lot bigger than what you think.
Right.
You put the limit
No,
on here.
I'm just thinking in terms of like, is it, what if somebody wanted to put 9 people in an 8x10 bedroom?
Oh,
You know what I'm saying? Where we would, but that would go through us anyway.
yeah.
That'll be also something we touch on here in a little bit.
Okay.
And that kind of brings up a question. Maybe it doesn't even matter, but pets, that's totally separate from counting the number. Okay.
It is, except where a kennel or dog boarding type facility or Livestock is already prohibited in town, so those are taken care of by other codes. I don't know if dog kennel, usually it's not included in the residential neighborhoods, just because even as a conditional use, then it could end up in a residential neighborhood, and then you're just gonna have conflicts from that point forward. So, even though our former one, I can't remember,
They're referring to the vet.
North,
Yeah.
further down, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
is that, was that on the fairgrounds property?
Yeah, it's just south of that.
Mm-hmm. It's zoned commercial over there.
I think it's zone commercial.
It's this right here.
Yeah, so
So it wasn't,
it was in commercial,
Right.
Mhm.
and that's probably why they zoned it commercial.
Yep.
So any type of situation, even though we would want a small animal vet back in town,
Mm-hmm.
those types of situations, you want to make sure it's in the right zone.
Yep.
But the conditional uses, assisted living, boarding house, group home, general, 9+, bed and breakfast, daycare, commercial, greenhouses, nurseries, safety service, cemetery, crematory, mausoleum, convalescent care, golf course, heliport or helipad, and then utility infrastructure like a substation for electrical or those type of things. And then, again, our catch-all one at the bottom.
Does daycare commercial would be a facility that is not someone's home, correct? If they
Yeah,
had a daycare in their home, that would be considered something different than,
that's more a home occupation, but it also depends on the daycare rules, which I don't know off the top of my head,
I know they're different.
as far as number of kids and number
Right.
of employees and all that
Yeah.
jazz.
Give me a second, I'll tell you. It's in the definition.
Also, greenhouses and nurseries, those aren't commercial ones? Like
Mhm.
big high tunnels and things and
Well, it would,
like.
it doesn't have, it could fit in a residential zone.
Mm-hmm,
You know, especially if it's just the nursery, that could be in a residential zone.
okay,
You know, if you see, you know.
It would just have to fall under the conditional use and go through a approval
Okay.
process, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
Like a
because I know
garden.
like,
Couldn't you, like a garden, wouldn't that be?
it would depend on the definition, but I'm sure the definition is more than just a garden for yourself.
Okay.
It would be the sell, you know, the selling of,
So if you put up a greenhouse and you were selling stuff out of it, that would.
yeah.
yeah,
Now, you know, like Bud and Blooms is in a commercial zone
Right.
right
Yeah.
now,
right,
but,
So daycare commercial is a daycare conducted in a structure other than a private residence for 7 or more children. Daycare limited is a daycare establishment conducted in a private residence that provides care, protection, and supervision of 12 or less individuals at any one time, excluding those persons related to and residing in the home of the daycare provider. A use that provides care, protection, and supervision for the individuals on a regular basis away from their primary residence for less than 24 hours.
now, a commercial daycare could fit in a residential neighborhood,
Yes.
or you might want it there. And so, it's
That makes sense on the conditional
a
use.
conditional
Yeah, it
use. It
does.
depends a lot on how many,
Yep,
right,
you know,
It-
like in the res care facility.
yeah.
right,
Could you see that becoming a commercial daycare?
right.
Makes sense.
As, back to the nurseries, now I do, like, I know somebody up on Clark has an orchard and a market garden. I don't think he's doing it now because he's sick, but he did it for several years. That would have been a conditional use, correct?
And it depends on what it was when they created the last zoning code. Like, it could be technically a non-conforming use,
Okay,
which means if it ever transferred ownership or anything like that, or it goes for so long without actually being that, then it would have to revert back to the.
to
the
being like a
rules.
building lot.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm, okay.
That's good, coming up with questions. But it's causing me to bring up the code a second time, so I can find things quicker.
I mean, you don't have it memorized off the top of your head.
No, not quite yet. I was just thinking of within the use standards, but I don't know if Zach could probably find it quicker than he can me because he's been a lot quicker. But I'd rather you stay on where you're at.
It's my best friend. What
It's your
do you
best
wanna know?
friend.
What do you
because
want to
he's looked at it
know?
so much.
What were you looking for?
Just the definition of nurseries or greenhouses, but it's probably not.
Greenhouse or nursery is an establishment where flowers, trees, and other products that are commonly used as landscaping in and around buildings are grown and sold. So they kind of have both words tied up into one definition.
Mhm.
And then there's nothing for nursery just as itself.
Like big market garden on a big lot. So that would mean if someone would want to do that, because I know somebody that owns a vacant lot, and they're big gardeners, and
Well,
Right.
and
And
that's.
would they have to, if it was for a market garden, would they have to go through us?
Yep.
What if it's just for their own self-sufficient lifestyle?
Then that's considered a
fine.
garden.
That's considered
Okay.
garden, that's no
Okay.
problem.
Okay.
It's only when you may possibly increase the amount of traffic into the
Okay.
area from people coming to buy the stuff, really.
How about,
And we have had complaints, code enforcement complaints regarding the one that you talked about up on
on Clark?
Mhm.
North Clark
Yeah.
from the neighbors. Now, I don't know the validity of those complaints, but we have had complaints, and that's why you would go through a conditional use to allow the neighbors to
Right.
say something about it before you make a decision regarding it.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean if someone objects that it's
It can't be
rejected,
done. Right.
it's still a decision.
Right.
Well, it could, I guess it could inform how they should do it then, too.
Yeah, and then there'd be like, do you want screening, or do you want fencing, or
Mhm.
some of the other things, is there anything that's gonna be objectionable
Right.
in some way or another regarding it?
I would think the weed ordinance about, like, if they don't keep it mowed between rows and things like that would apply anyway, right?
Yep, that applies through every zone.
Okay.
Also like rodent control and pest control, you probably have more
Yeah.
of that around the neighborhood or whatever too.
Yeah.
That's why we have 3 million stray cats.
Yeah.
Oh, my neighbor on
Yeah.
the north feeds all the stray cats, and my neighbor on the south feeds all the squirrels.
Oh, my goodness.
And I get all of
And you
the,
get the reap the
I
benefits.
get all of the corn cobs and peanuts and cat pee, stuff like that. I'm like, I don't know, I'm like, I have a headless cat. I'm ready to put it on her porch. A
Squirrels, you
statue
might
that
want
the
that.
head fell off. I'm like, I'm gonna put this together.
You might want to go to the gun shop.
Yeah, I know.
There's an ordinance against that.
There's an ordinance
Yeah.
against that, trust me.
Well, you never know,
Okay.
you might want to fatten them squirrels up, it might be a long winter.
I know. Oh, we have the most obese squirrels in our neighborhood. They are
Well,
really
moving
obese.
on
And
from
I'm
squirrels.
sorry.
Let's get back on to our discussion.
Sorry.
We'll go on to number 4, subsection 4, which goes into intensity of use regulations. Now, this one doesn't change by the look of it, but it does change one of the items within it. The current code says intensity of use of the regulations, except as modified by the provisions of Article 6, which is exactly how the new one states. But then the current one has minimum lot area of 8,400 square feet for single-family dwellings. And the proposed one is 7,000 square feet. And then minimum lot width, and then it also goes on to 2 other areas, which was 4,500 square feet per dwelling unit for 2 family dwellings, with a minimum lot size of 9,000 square feet, which we do not include in the new one. And then something about lots platted prior to the adoption of these regulations. Shall have an area, it's interesting that they have shall have there, not less than 7,000 square feet. This just combines it all into 7,000 square feet. And if it doesn't have 7,000 square feet, it's just a non-conforming use. Minimum lot width is 50 feet, which is the same as, well, the minimum lot previously was 75 feet. So that helps out some of the smaller lots as well. And when a lot of our lots are 140 feet deep, 50 feet wide by 140 is 7,000. And then lot coverage, the current has the combined area of the main building, accessory building shall not cover more than 50% of the total area of the lot. And the new one is the same, correct?
It's the same, but instead of, it just changed the wording to principal structure.
Instead of main building.
Right, okay.
But it keeps that 50% lot coverage, which is pretty large, but then it allows more creativity on the property owner to do what they want with the lot. So,
I think this came up in our discussion. I remember somebody bringing it up, but on the lot coverage piece. So we're talking about 50% coverage, but it mentions structure. So what about impermeable surfaces like driveways?
it doesn't mention.
Doesn't mention that.
Doesn't include that.
Yeah. I think the concern was drainage, which I don't really think is a huge concern in this part of the world, but
It is when there's a big storm.
yeah.
well.
Once or twice a year, you know, probably. But I guess the question is, the way I would read it right here is that the driveway coverage would not count in the 50%
Correct.
Coverage.
It's just the square footage of the buildings.
of the buildings.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Not including any eave projections or anything like that. It's
Just the footprint of the buildings.
Yes.
I think that's good.
So on the smaller lots, and especially ones that are non-conforming of 7,000 square feet, which we do have some, I think it's 100 some lot, that, that they don't get penalized by having a long driveway.
I also like not including that because it provides the opportunity to create off-street parking, improved off-street parking, and discourages driving on the grass and creating dirt.
Right.
So I think that's a good thing
Yeah.
that we don't include that. I'd rather than pour a driveway than, just park.
Now, part of that does bring up something that Barb had mentioned in her notes from what we have already previously looked at. And it was no more than 2 accessory structures on a single lot. Do we want to include something like that? Or do we just strictly go off of the lot coverage percentage? Because there are a few lots that have more than 2 accessory structures on them already. And if you already have a garage and a shed, you want to put up an ADU, then you'd have to take either your garage or your shed down to put up that ADU.
I'd rather see it the 50% and not worry about the number of buildings,
That's what
just in
that's
case
right.
that
I
comes
agree.
up.
I agree with
I
you.
agree.
Okay. Then we don't have to sit there and count buildings.
Right.
Yeah,
Or attached buildings. I mean, one of the houses I've owned, when I lived in Ulysses, I ended up, there was 5 buildings on the lot, and it was a small lot. I mean, it was like one of these.
Mhm.
And, I mean, one was a very, when it was originally built, little shed by the alley. So that wasn't even used, but it still had 4 other buildings. And then eventually we built the breezeway to connect.
Mhm.
But that might be what you would have to ask someone to do. If you're counting structures, then, okay, how am I gonna connect them?
And that, to me, that feels like forcing them to do something just to conform
Right.
versus leaving it like this, then you don't have to force them to build that connection that really doesn't serve any purpose other
Right.
than to come into compliance.
Yeah.
as long as they stay under 50 or
50%.
50%. Yeah,
Which is still quite a big blueprint.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, on a 7,000 square foot lot, that's 3,500 square
Yeah.
feet of
Yeah,
building.
that's-
If you have a lot that size, chances are you're not gonna build 3,500 square
No.
feet on it. So,
No.
yeah, I think it's fine.
The next section is height regulations, where there's not a change, it's just maximum. Structure height, 35 feet.
I do have a question about that. Like, for instance, the towers, those are, is that residential, considered in a residential zone? And what if someone, like say out west or something, if
Well-
some, and they wanted to build an apartment building?
So if it's in the R1 zone, then it can't do that. But if it is in an R2 zone and they want to build an apartment building that's higher than that, then they would have to apply for a variance and come
Okay.
before you guys and
Okay.
explain their case, and then you would have to make the decision on whether or not it's okay.
Okay.
Now, currently it is in R2. It's down a little bit from there, Josh, but, yeah, right there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it is in R2, it's in the red,
Mm-hmm.
or the current color. And Barb wants us to change
Yeah.
colors. But
Okay,
we'll come to that in our second ordinance
okay,
regarding that.
okay.
And then the yard regulations. What we had was 60 feet from the center of the street or the established building line as far as the front lot, yard. We've changed that to 20 feet from the property line or the building line,
Kind of.
or the average distance measured from the curb to the neighboring properties on the block. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not switching on my computer to look back at the final version of the thing. So is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Is that 20 feet? That's probably pretty close to what most houses are set back today.
It's a good average,
Okay.
yeah.
but
Which
you'll
there,
still,
there are some that are less than that, but that's where the average distance measured from the curb
Yes.
to the neighboring properties.
Yeah.
That way you can match theirs and you're not having to be pushed back or
Yep.
anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably acts like the definition for building line,
Yeah.
rather than saying building line, and there may be confusion about that term.
Mm-hmm.
It has that.
Yeah, I like that better.
yeah,
Now, the side yards currently we have shall not be less than 10% of the lot width. Such setbacks shall be no less than 6 feet. And then C, a different section for corner lots. And then what we have in the proposed is 1 story, 6 feet from the property line, 2 stories, 10 feet from the property line, and 3 stories, 14 feet from the property line. Now, this is minimum side yard setback. That does not mean, you know, you have to build at that point. You can have a larger side yard setback. But that takes a little bit of math out, like we had talked about.
So I'm just thinking of my house, that's on a corner lot. And my side yard is actually like my backyard, so what do we consider side front? I mean, is it where the front and back door is, or what, how do you decide?
Per the definition, it's, because I'm assuming your house probably sits at an angle to the corner.
No, it's square with the corner, it's just, my front door is on 12th Street, and my kitchen door would be facing north, but it's really on Caldwell. But I only have like maybe 8 feet to the next property from my door. So I was just
To the
wondering.
property north on
To north,
Caldwell.
exactly, right. So I was just,
You have more room to the east.
yes, yeah, I got 20, and then, what I call my backyard, which is actually the side yard, I have like 40, 50 feet till it goes to the alley, it goes out east. So how do we distinguish front, rear?
But the side to the north is probably more your side yard.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean,
Wherever the house is addressed to, because that's obviously gonna be the front of the house,
Mhm.
is how they address it, then that would determine what the side, and what the front, and what the rear is. of the
okay,
house.
so whatever the address, that your street address is, that's your front, then, okay. 'Cause I see that there might be other issues with corner lots or something like that.
And that'll come up later on in definitions and also the standards, because there's a lot of, the way it's worded kind of holds people to a standard of pushing their house way back into the lot
Right,
and not
right,
being able to actually utilize it.
right, okay.
Then they end up with a giant front yard and a tic-tac box in the backyard.
Right, exactly, yeah.
There's a definition. The current definition, where the property fronts on 2 intersecting streets, a corner lot, such lot shall maintain an established building line both streets except in the following cases.
Just the following cases are if there's no buildings within, I think, 100 feet of it.
100 feet,
Yeah.
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 And then the rear yard currently is 12 feet, and the proposed one has 10 feet from the property line. And then the proposed includes for accessory use structures. Again, it has front yard, basically the same definition as the principal structure. And then go down one, Josh. Side yard of 6 feet, if less than 200 square foot, side yard is reduced to 0. And that's following building code as far as, you know, if you have a tiny little shed or
Yeah.
playhouse or something. You can put that anywhere on your lot, so.
Okay.
Just not closer to the front than the principal structure. Can't be in your front yard.
Can't put an ADU in your front yard.
Can't do it in your front yard.
Yeah.
And then a rear yard of 10 feet, which is the same as the previous one.
Yep.
And that's really just trying to follow fire code as well, trying to keep structures somewhat apart. That's why you have setbacks. Any questions on number 6 there? And then number 7, minimum separation of structures. Now that's the structures on the lot.
Okay.
habitable structures detached 10 feet. So,
You put an ADU in your yard, it has to be at least 10 feet away from the principal structure.
if it's two different structures, you want some separation there so fire can't jump
Yeah.
from one to the other. And then non-habitable structures at least 6 feet.
Well, we can back up a little bit. So when we talk about the alley, is that a property line?
So, from the center of the alley, it's 10 feet to the property line.
Okay.
And then you have 10 feet off of that property line. Which that's really just to simplify when people want to build garages or ADUs in the backyard. It's just straight across the board, doesn't matter, it's 10 foot.
And we do have several garages in town that are built 3 foot up,
Right.
or almost right on the property line.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a couple drainage situations that come up on a regular basis. And the neighbors complain about the garage that's right there on the property line. Because wherever they have their gutters or anything else, and they want to flow it to the alley, and then it starts going into a neighbor's yard and gets to be an issue. Most of the homes, most of the drainage comes to the front instead of going to the alley, because our alleys, we kind of have them higher than the backyards. So, or at least even with the backyards. So that's number 7. And then number 8 is some design standards, which we really don't have much of at this point.
And the whole purpose for the design standards is once we get to the definitions, we can remove the design standards off of the modular homes and manufactured homes, because you can't apply it to one structure and not the other structure. So this will just simplify it and say this is what it can be, the minimum it can be.
Yeah, I was reading through this, and the one that caught my eye was storage on site. So are we saying that's a requirement? They have to have that storage?
And that's why we brought it to you guys, for you to discuss. This is just what was kind of brought up in conversations with Barb and Kent and I.
Yeah, that's number 5. I don't know. I didn't know if that was something we need to.
It says storage on site. Every dwelling unit or structure must have adequate storage on site in the form of one or more of the following storage facilities: basement, carport with storage shed, or garage. And what's that to address, Zach?
Nuisances, people leaving stuff outside, strung out all over the place, so it would be more hidden.
So if you build an ADU or they have something else, you want to make sure that it can be within that facility rather than generating too much on the outside of the building.
I'm trying to think if there would ever be a situation where you wouldn't, like somebody would object to that. They wouldn't, I can get the basement, but you've got other options,
Right.
But is it too limiting?
Well, I'm just wondering, like, okay, let's say somebody had a tiny house, or, they put that, are they gonna have any of this,
Yeah, so if you put an ADU on your property, you have to create storage space, essentially.
Well, or they could store it in the principal
It
structure.
could, okay, so the principal structure, if they had a garage or whatever, that would count. Okay.
It just needs adequate storage.
Yeah. I like the idea. I just want to make sure we're not
See,
being too limiting.
it seems like that, I mean, yeah, but you can't code people into using it, can you?
No, they can still store everything outside and be a problem.
Yeah.
That doesn't stop them.
So,
But,
Yeah.
But if they're building or creating something new, then,
Right,
there can't be an excuse saying, well, I don't have any storage,
Right.
right.
you know. Well, if you choose not to use it or not, that's a different
Right,
question or problem. Then, well, I don't have anything, I have to store it. I have to store my 10 mowers outside
right.
Yeah.
because.
'cause- yeah.
Or my couch.
Okay. Back to the carport with storage shed. Should there be something in here that just, like without a carport, like a storage shed without a carport? Or are you trying to create?
So the way that it reads, for something that hasn't went through this, is like, this is your three options,
Right, yeah.
Mhm.
as opposed to having additional options of a, like a storage shed or things like that.
And I could see that says one or more of the following storage facilities.
Yeah. And then list out the three and not even a seven.
It could be such as a basement.
Yeah.
Storage shed, carport with a storage shed.
Right. These are 3 examples. It doesn't mean it's the exclusive examples.
That would make me feel better.
Yeah.
If we gave some examples but said there are other ways to create storage,
Right.
like you want to, you don't want a carport, but you'll put a storage shed in. Right now, it doesn't feel like I can do that. It feels like I got to put a carport with a storage shed in it.
Mhm. Is there any minimum standards as far as the size of the storage sheds?
No.
No.
That would just fall under the accessory structures.
Yep.
Okay. Okay,
Lot coverage.
got it. So theoretically, someone could try and skirt the expense of a storage thing by saying, well, I have a little, cabinet that I put my trash cans in against my house. I mean, I'm not trying to be,
No, or I can't
Anything.
afford to build
right,
one, carport
right,
or purchase a carport.
right.
I'm just
You
gonna
want-
have this little container. Yeah, well,
I'm not like,
I guess that's where adequate storage would come into play
Yeah,
and the
true,
wording of it.
okay,
I think that the word adequate probably covers
Yeah.
you there,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
a little cabinet like that would not be adequate because you couldn't put more than a trash can in it,
mhm, right.
I
I'm
think
thinking
if
like
you
a
just,
lean-to thing.
just make that just a little less specific, like these are the only things, and a little more general, like this is the examples of some things, then I'd feel better about that piece.
and I think we might have a little bit of discussion about the whole thing. I mean, that, number 5 in general. I think we're okay, it's just either have the wording such as, or,
Yeah, I think it needs to be in there, but just make it such as basement, carport, storage shed, garage.
some way to say, these are examples.
Yep.
Then we have roof form, ratio of open surface to enclosed surfaces. Shall be similar to and compatible with that of nearby dwelling units or structures. Or else within the subdivision or neighborhood.
Does it account for same color asphalt shingles too?
It's not on there currently. We can put it on there, but I'm sure there'll be some arguments about that.
Somebody's gonna want a crazy color. Somebody might want multiple colors.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Like your
My
kids.
daughter lives in a house that has multiple colors on it. Yeah.
No, I can find some HOAs for you that
Yeah,
specify that.
exactly. That's probably a different discussion.
Yeah.
There aren't any neighborhoods with HOAs here, are there?
No.
Yes, Rosewood, but they have all been violated so bad that there's
Oh,
no
wow.
way it's enforceable, but yes.
Okay.
And then actually there are some plotted lots out in the county that have HOAs with them as well, but nobody's followed that either. And I know because we've lived in both.
Okay.
Well, I learned something new.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
The HOA.
Rosewood has some pretty strict guidelines, and every single one is broken up there.
Hmm.
Yep.
There's a property, well, I think you know it pretty well because I think your daughter is married to O'Hara.
Mm-hmm.
The height requirement of that would never pass now, would it?
I don't think so.
You know the property I'm talking about?
Yeah. Over on Montana, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, for every building hereafter erected or structure altered, off-street parking spaces or spaces for unloading and loading and unloading, vehicle stacking, property ingress and egress shall be provided. All required off-street parking, stacking, loading spaces shall be surfaced with an impervious surface. It's really not much different from what we have now, it's just moved to
Yep.
this section. And then the off-street parking area shall be located on the same legal lot as the principal use. So we do have people that own multiple lots in town, and it's saying if your off-street parking needs to count on the same lot. Doesn't mean you can't have lots over there, you just need to have lots on your legal lot. And that's, and then reference to parking in whatever section it's currently in. So that's the proposed ordinance.
Okay.
You guys okay with that? I mean, besides the one thing.
Just a little bit of wording in
Yeah.
number 5 right there, and I think we're good.
Okay.
Everyone agree?
Yeah, that's the only thing that caught my eye. So.
Yeah.
Well, Chair, if you're okay with that, then,
We need do we need a motion to set a public hearing?
yes. And it'll be
And that
on
needs to be when?
May 12th.
That sounds right.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Wally, did you have a question? Did you have a question?
No, I do not.
Oh, I thought you were raising your hand over there, so
No.
I was just wanting to make sure.
I was gonna make a motion.
Oh, well then, by all means. Go ahead.
Well, my motion would be to accept this as we've gone through it and looked at changes and that it requires, up to snuff.
So,
And
set a public hearing for May 12th.
Yeah,
that's what he said.
That's what he
That-
meant.
yeah,
up to snuff.
that's right.
So let me summarize that. Wally has moved that we set a public hearing for the ordinance amending text in Chapter 19, Section 452 for May 12th. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, moved by Wally, seconded by Grady. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes.
And Ken, I guess you guys put that in the paper then?
Correct, it's May 14th, not May 12th.
Oh, sorry, May.
14th.
That was my fault,
That's all right.
but motion is hereby amended, I guess.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And I made a quick change to that document and that all is,
Okay. Very good.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Now let's go through the second ordinance
Yes.
that we have for you, which is for section 453 R2. And you'll notice R2 kind of is very similar to R1 is currently. The intent is to provide moderate to high density residential development, including, and then what the proposed one, I think the intent is worded slightly different from what the current wording is. including duplexes, multifamily, and all forms of residential housing types in a manner that will encourage a wider range of housing types.
All right, there we go. It's a little bit easier to read.
Housing types and increase of housing affordability. So that's the intent. The current one ends with in a manner which will encourage a strong residential neighborhood. What we have in the proposed is in a manner of, see how, I'm trying to go faster than Josh can switch it.
He's
but-
quick.
in a manner that will encourage wider range of housing types and increase housing affordability.
Yeah, that's better.
I don't think there's anything.
Other than just taking out single-family dwellings, but that's covered under all forms of residential housing types.
Yeah.
So you can have a single family in R2. And that's important in that if you would have a fire or a tornado or something else, you could rebuild that single family in R2. You're not restricted and say, well, now that it's destroyed, you got to build a duplex.
Yeah.
Right.
Which we have in a lot of the area just south of City Hall here is R2. And there's several single-family homes within it.
Yeah.
So,
I do have a question. I know we talked about it already, but we talked about group home limited, 1 to 8 individuals. So that's the max, 8 is the max that can be within a home? Is that what we're saying? I'm wondering, would it be better to say, like, based on the number of rooms? You know, like bedrooms or whatever, you know, like 2 people per bedroom or something? I don't know, I'm just wondering if you have like two bedrooms and you got 8 people in there.
a lot of times group homes get into.
I'll give you the definition for it. A group home limited is a residential home providing 24-hour care in a protected environment for 8 or less unrelated persons with mental or physical disabilities. Such home may include 2 additional persons acting as house parents or guardians who need not be related to each other or to any of the mentally or physically handicapped persons residing in the home.
Okay.
And then group home general is a residential home providing 24-hour care in a protected living environment for more than 8 persons with physical or mental disabilities and any number of caregivers. So
Okay.
that's where it separates itself from, say, a frat house or
Yeah,
sorority
okay.
house.
That helps, yeah, okay, that makes more sense to me. Okay, thanks.
So what we have in the proposed is then after the intent, we have again the permitted uses. But then under the permitted uses, it goes through principal uses, permitted accessory uses by right, and then home occupancy, and then public, quasi-public, and recreational. So it kind of goes through in that same format.
That's good.
And then the principal uses by right are multifamily dwellings, single-family dwellings, and 2-family dwellings. Is that correct?
Oh, there we go, sorry.
Yeah, 2AA.
Okay. Where that has dwellings or family, were we gonna make that duplexes or not, or is that when we do
Yes, I need
definitions?
to revise that.
Instead of two-family, make it duplexes, yeah. I didn't catch that earlier, and the rest of us didn't catch that either. It says that, yeah. But then also rooming houses, boarding houses, dormitories when associated with a college or medical facility, which we do have in this town. Group home limited, 1 to 8 individuals. Also manufactured home communities, institutional and quasi-public uses, including community centers, family care homes, group homes, healthcare support facilities, and places of worship, which we have all of those in our community. And then other uses, again, the qualifier at the end. If it's like it, and we think it quacks like a duck, it's the duck that's an R2. And then we go on to permitted accessory uses by right, which includes ADUs, fences and walls, but then we refers to a different section for that because there's a lot of information on fences and walls. Garages, carports, off-street parking, loading areas. Now, the garages cannot exceed 1,200 square feet and 20 feet to the peak. That is something different. We did have, 16 feet for accessory buildings?
It depended on what section you looked at, but yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, in one section. If you didn't like the person, it was 16 feet. If you liked the person, it was 20 feet. But no, I'm just kidding. But 1,200 square feet in size, which 30 by 40, anything more than that needs approval.
Yeah.
Parking for the principal use, and then refers to the parking ordinance. And then radio and television stuff, rec and play facilities for residents, which in larger apartment complexes, that often becomes a deal. Storage and parking of RV equipment such as boats and campers and all kinds of other stuff. It does state on there RV vehicles, recreational vehicles or equipment shall not be stored or parked within required off-street parking. Needs to be on a separate parking area. Storm shelters, fallout shelters, same thing as R1. Swimming pools, same as R1. And then again, the catch-all. Other uses not specifically listed. And then letter C is home occupancy uses. Refers to a different section. Public, quasi-public, and rec uses. And it kind of goes through the same stuff that's in R1, correct, Zach?
Yep. Which all of those I took straight out of our use table. So it's already what's permitted in there and then also what's kind of already there. So when we go back to the same situation of if fire, tornado, something happens, they can rebuild what was there.
So a lot of this stuff is just, we're approving it to go in this section,
Mm-hmm.
where we had it written somewhere else. We're putting it over here.
Putting it here too.
Any questions on those permitted uses? And then it has conditional uses for R2. And it's kind of the same things, accessory dwelling units. Just want to make sure.
Nurseries and greenhouses isn't in there.
Which I have that in both sections because I wanted that to be a question for you guys. Do you want that to be a permitted use or a conditional use when it comes to R2? Because we're already talking about higher density, but if you have an apartment building,
Right.
is it okay for them to still build a house, an ADU, on that lot as well? Or is that something we want to make a conditional use because, say, the lot's really big in the apartment complex, but then you want to have an ADU for the manager or something?
Mm-hmm.
Either the manager or a clubhouse type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Make that,
That
something
does
that
for
they
our-
request.
Yeah, I feel like it's better in the conditional use.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
it can be allowed, but you need to go through a process.
Right, yeah.
Rather than just saying you can have it. Because, yeah, the density is already high. So maybe we don't just want to automatically stamp that and say you could do it.
Well, and a lot of times, if it's brand new, it's gonna be part of your original plan anyway.
Yeah.
And then if you're deviating from that original plan, oh, well, I want another structure.
Yeah.
Well, it's not automatic, it's just,
Yeah.
Right.
just checking to make sure that, you know, that's the other thing, people think, well, if you have to go through a process, that makes it prohibitive. No, it doesn't, you just have to go through the process, let your neighbors know, and
Yep.
have a good reasoning for your wanting to do it.
Well, and then they still gotta meet the requirement of the 50%.
Right.
Right.
Right. And then it also has the group home, general, the bed and breakfast, the daycare limited, safety service, which I don't know what safety service means.
Three, fire, EMS.
Give me a second.
So a big apartment complex maybe would have a garage housing a small pumper or something? Or, I don't know.
I missed what you were saying. I was looking for the definition, sorry.
No, well, I
Keep
mean,
looking for the definition.
Oh, I got
Yeah.
it.
What's the definition?
A facility for conduct of public safety and emergency services, including fire and police protection services and emergency medical and ambulance service.
So that's the Wolock building next door here. Or the police's armory. I can't think of any other buildings in town.
I can't think of anything else we have, but I can think in other places that I've lived where you would have a community fire station
right.
that's sort of remote from the bigger one,
Or
or,
the
Right.
urgent care or something.
yeah, an urgent care or something like that.
Cemeteries, golf course, heliport or helipad. And then anything else. And that's basically taking it from our current use table.
It was just pulling it out of the table that's really confusing and hard to go through and putting it within the section that it actually involves, so you only gotta look one place in the code, not 13 different places.
Number 4 is intensity of use regulations. Again, it has minimum lot area. Single family is 7,000 square feet, which is different from the, actually, it's the same. That was always what was confusing.
For the two-family though, it used to only be 8,000 and didn't that go up to 9,000?
Yeah, R1 had 8,400 for single
Our
family.
one had to be bigger,
Right,
And then R2 was 7,000 for single family. It's
Yeah.
like, why?
yeah.
right.
And then
Yeah.
9,000 for the two family and 8,000 in R2. And then 2,000 square feet for larger units. So it's just here in the proposed is 7,000 for single family, 3,500 square feet per unit for the duplex, which basically comes out to the same minimum lot size.
Right.
And then multifamily is still at the 2,000 square feet per unit.
And that's where I wanted to ask you guys, do you wanna leave it at the 2,000? Because if you have 3 dwellings, then that's 6,000 square foot.
Right, exactly. I was thinking that myself.
So do we want to up that just a little bit to try and make it close to the 7,000?
I think, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think that would make more sense to me, but I don't know what everybody else thinks.
When you go much larger, like the handy towers or others, you need that 2,000 square feet. As far as, or you start getting really big. What you could have is you still have to meet the 7,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if we made it
know how to
2,300
word
feet,
that.
square feet, is that what you're thinking? Or,
I kind of like what Kent was saying, where you could leave it at 2,000 square foot per unit with a minimum of 7,000 square feet. That way, if they are only building 3, they still have to meet the 7,000 instead of the 6,000.
Mm-hmm.
let's see.
That's probably the easiest way to do it and not have to figure out the exact.
So two could have a larger, and then one could have a smaller, if they want, as long as it was at least 2,000.
Well, yeah,
See, I'm
So
getting
two of them was
confused.
2,500, two units were 2,500, and then one was 2,000, is that what, it's something like?
well, this is lot size, so it's not the size of the building.
Oh,
You're gonna
okay,
build a
okay, lot
multifamily
size,
unit.
okay, yeah, yeah.
And you're gonna
okay.
build 3 units.
Uh-huh.
If we say that the units have to be, you have to have 2,000 square feet a lot per unit, then they could get away with a 6,000 square foot lot, which we're saying our lots are minimum 7,000.
Mhm.
So we're letting them basically get away with less square footage per unit, but at the end, they have to clear that 7,000
So
or
by
they can't do
unit,
it.
like you mean there's 2 units in a duplex?
Well, this would be like more than 2.
Like the multifamily would be like 3 or 4 or
Yeah.
6.
Anything over 2 is considered.
Right, a multifamily.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was confused in my mind whether
Well, and
each unit could be up to 2 by unit. Does that mean,
Not
That
talking
doesn't-
about the square
Just-
footage of the building.
okay,
Yeah,
that's where I was
I
getting confused.
too, yeah, so
Okay,
the lot
that makes
size,
sense.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just lot size.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like Kent's example, Handy Towers, they have a lot more units than that.
Right.
So when you require 2,000 square feet per 30 units, so that's gonna be a really big lot.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
Right.
And of course, if you wanna go on a lot smaller than that, that's when they would apply for a variance and come in front of you guys and make sure it's a good foot fit.
Okay.
A good foot and a good fit. So-
Yeah, there you go.
There you go,
Okay.
makes sense.
Thank you.
And then it also reduces the lot width from 75 feet to 50 feet. And then the lot coverage, it still has the 50%. So that's that box. Is that okay with you all?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
With the one change in it?
Yep.
Number 5 is height regulations, maximum, this didn't change, maximum structure height 35 feet. Which for larger apartment complexes, that might become a little bit of an issue. But anything new, that probably would be a good thing to have, a little bit of review, make sure it's okay. Yard regulations, this basically just copies the yard regulations from the previous one, correct, Zach?
Yes.
So it's basically the same thing we had in R1. And the minimum separation of structures, again, is the same. And design standards are a little bit different at the beginning, but then the rest of it, I think, is the same.
AC is a little different.
8C,
No. Alpha Charlie.
Alpha Charlie. Reduce the copy, good buddy. Reduce the visual intrusion of parking areas, screened storage areas, and similar accessory structures. That's something you're going to have in larger sets of multifamily. You're going to have trash enclosures, hopefully. you could have carports, multiple
Mm-hmm.
set up, or additional storage. So,
We back up a little bit. I'm looking at a table with the yard sizes
mhm.
versus side yard. It says 6 feet, but then below it says if less than 200 square feet, side yard is reduced to 0. What's that?
Accessory structures. So currently in code and also by building code, anything less than 200 square feet doesn't require a permit. And then it also makes it to where you can build or place right on the property line.
Okay.
And I think in the previous example, you had accessory structures listed with separate boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
No, it's the same way in R1.
oh, there it
It
is.
looks exactly the same.
It says accessory, okay.
Yeah, it would just have to be on a different page, right? So, I'm not doing mine.
Which if you want me to separate them into separate tables, I can do that.
But we do need to add rear yard for accessory use structures.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, that's missing.
You want a copy from the
Yeah,
R1?
please.
Thank you for pointing that out, Grady.
Yep, good catch.
So saying 10 feet,
Mm-hmm.
you have rear yard.
Do I not have it on the other one either?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is. Yeah.
And then I think it,
Same wording on the storage on site, and so I jump back to design standards.
Mm-hmm.
You need to fix that wording, it's F here instead of 5 in the other one. Yeah, just fix that wording like you did in the last one. There you go.
it had one more on the R1, the parking for the principal structure. It referred to the parking ordinance. But this R2, I don't think it has it at the end of the design standards. Talks about the same legal lot,
Mm-hmm.
but then it had number 9.
There was a numbering error on the R1. Should have
Yeah.
been number 10.
Well, it actually, I think the design standard should be A, B, C, D, E, F, G,
Oh,
H, I.
yes, the design standards should be lettered. And then,
And
there
then
you
that-
go. There you go.
Yeah, that. Just referring to the parking. So, and then that's the end of that ordinance.
Okay. Any other questions or discussions on that? All right, so I will try to get the wording similar. I move that we set a public hearing for an ordinance amending the text of chapter 19, section 453, R2 residential, for May 14th.
That'll work.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved by Matt, seconded by Grady. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay, moving on. We are through the meat of that, so we're up to reports. So Grady, any reports for the
Nothing to report.
Dennis?
No.
Mary Ellen?
Nope.
Wally?
Nothing?
Nothing from me. Kent?
One thing I wanted to ask, we talked about previously, do we want to set another meeting to try to handle another ordinance towards the end of the month? Would you guys be willing to meet 2 weeks from tonight for another ordinance review?
That would be the
The
23rd.
I'm not sure we're gonna be here. Let me double check when we're actually leaving.
And I don't know if it's absolutely critical, but it's just trying
Yeah,
to get the
I'll
train
still be
moving.
in town.
If we could, it would be nice just to keep this thing moving, and
agree
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll still be
I
in
should
town.
be around. You'll still be in town? Okay.
Yeah.
let's set another meeting for the 23rd.
Okay. We will present another ordinance to the city commission just for their initial input, which they didn't have any for this. But at least then they get to see it. It also lets the public know that it's starting.
Mhm.
And then we will have a meeting on April 23rd for that ordinance. And then you'll set it for the public, for a public hearing either later in May, because the time frame you needed
Right.
20 days and
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 times twice in the paper or something like that. Or the first meeting in June. But we can
Yeah.
let you guys know that next time.
Okay.
And then we will have at the May 14th meeting, we'll have these 2 ordinances, have the public hearing, and then you will, at the end of once the public hearing is closed, then you can recommend it for approval to the city commission.
Okay.
And other than that, that's all I have.
Zach, anything?
Nothing to report here at this time, as the city commissioners would say.
Okay. Moving on to minutes from the March 12th meeting. Anybody have any additions, subtractions?
I have a correction.
Oh, you have a correction.
I do. It looked like you cut and paste all the no reports for the last one.
Yeah?
And I didn't have a report, and it says I did. So, and I mean, it's fine, I still would say the same thing.
Oh, okay.
I would still say the same thing, but if it, needs to be perfect, it's up to you.
No, it should be changed.
Annual report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we will adjust that.
Had nothing to report and was emphatic about it.
That's right.
Well, good catch. Thank you for reading the minutes.
Way to go, Mary.
Okay, it has been updated.
Yeah.
With that, I move we approve the minutes as edited.
I'll second it.
All right. Motion by Matt, seconded by Mary Ellen. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Very good. All right. Adjournment.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second.
All right.